All right. So by the end of the call today, we will have learned how to conduct a call for volunteers. Many of you may be familiar with that already. How to hold an election or create a slate, depending on the process that you use. We're going to learn a little bit more about onboarding our new board members and also evaluating our board strengths and weaknesses, as well as identifying any opportunities of areas of possible growth or areas that may need some improvement. And we also want to be sure that we walk away learning a little bit more about how to plan better for our chapters. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, before you send out a call for volunteers, take a look at your chapter's policies and procedures. Perhaps it's only once every 2 years you need to do this, maybe once a year, depending on the position. And you'll want to be sure to give yourself enough time for that entire process, starting with the call, all the way through the completion of the slate and the ballot, and of course through the induction of officers. You may find that this may be about a 6-month process from the very start with the call all the way to the induction. It may be longer, it may be shorter. But again, check out your policies and procedures and make sure that you're following those. You may also find that if a board member resigns midterm, you'll need to put out a call for volunteers if you don't have a succession plan in place, but hopefully you do. With that being said, you'll want to be sure you have up-to-date descriptions on each board position and allow potential volunteers to have full understanding of the responsibilities and the expectations of them if they choose to serve in the role. This shouldn't include only board positions, but committee positions or other short-term volunteer positions as well. Again, double check your policies. If it states such criteria as the person serving in a specific role has to be a CDM, be sure you include this type of criteria in the call as well. Also, rather than just ask the basic questions of, do you want to volunteer? Ask members why they would like to volunteer or why they think they would be good for a specific role, and ask them to provide examples. In other words, vet your candidates. Ask questions to get to know the candidate better and if they have the skills or experience that would fit into a particular role. Volunteers are likely to complete their term if they are in a role they enjoy or they are good at. Also, ask if they understand the responsibilities and the commitment that goes along with each role. It can be kind of frustrating for both parties when the expectations or responsibilities are not made clear from the very beginning, and that could, as we know, result in a volunteer resigning before they've even begun or into their term. The call is really also a great opportunity for members to throw their name in the hat for those short-term volunteer roles or fulfilling volunteer roles as needed. Don't limit the volunteer opportunities to long-term roles. Consider keeping a running list of volunteers that are able to help out with smaller short-term tasks or even as their schedule allows. So make sure you're assessing your needs as a chapter. Are you looking to grow or add new projects? How can volunteers or committees support these initiatives? And then be sure to include these opportunities in your call as well. So the best example I can give you of that sort of need that includes both those long-term and short-term volunteering, is some of you are probably familiar with, is the PTO or your PTA. I know with mine, we have the long-term volunteers like the president and the secretary and so on, but we also have opportunities throughout the school year to help with parties, fundraising events, or even just donate supplies or items to events and activities as needed. So, but these opportunities are often used for a stepping stone, not only within our PTO or PTA, but within our chapters, and it's a great way for recruitment and engagement on a continuous basis. So just something to keep in mind there. Next, you'll need to distribute this information, so the descriptions, the criteria, and those expectations, you need to distribute that information to all of your members. You can send it out via email, newsletter, posting it on your chapter website or social media accounts. But we also want to be sure we're including the instructions on how to submit their name. You could certainly try using SurveyMonkey, as it allows you to collect a lot of information rather than having to manually enter in a Word document or Excel spreadsheet. Some of you may be familiar with the national process, which we do use SurveyMonkey to allow our members to submit their names through that format. So something to keep in mind that makes the administrative work a little less tedious than if you were to have individuals emailing you constantly. Also within the survey, you're going to need to send it out probably more than once. Make sure you're giving your members a reminder. Make sure you're giving them a deadline to respond. And also consider those members that you know personally that may be a good fit for an open role. Sometimes asking someone outright has better results than waiting for others to step up. So think about those members you could encourage to submit their name or even appoint to those positions in some cases. So once the call has been completed and closed and volunteers have submitted their names, collect all those names and responses to the questions that were included in the call. And depending on how your chapter handles filling these open positions, you'll need to have all your board members review the submissions and make their selections, or the nominating committee, this would fall on them to create that slate. If you have, again, criteria for a specific role, like they must be a CDM, you need to confirm that, that is true, but you want to confirm that just in case. And then, of course, those folks that don't qualify for those certain positions, you want to weed them out to make sure you're really working from a clean, scrubbed group of candidates. And next, depending on your own process, you're going to want to either prepare for an election with a ballot or create a slate. And both of these are very simple processes. Again, consider using SurveyMonkey to distribute the ballot, as this allows members to vote very anonymously. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment, and we're actually going to go through a quick tutorial of how to create that ballot using SurveyMonkey. Okay, so for the sake of this demo, we're just going to say that I already have the SurveyMonkey account, which I do. For those of you that don't, signing up for an account is free, and you can create surveys that are 10 questions or less. So I highly encourage you to sign up for an account if you don't have one already. Now, for today's purposes, I'm not going to use an existing survey, but we're going to go ahead and start from scratch. So for those of you that are on the web portion, you're going to get to see this in action. For those of you just joining us on audio, I will try my best to walk you through this verbally. So again, I already have my account set up. I'm going to start my survey from scratch, and we're just going to give this a test ballot. Oops, spell that right. Name of my survey. You can classify it in category if you want. I'm not going to today. And then you're going to go ahead and hit Create Survey. And then from there, if you choose to add a logo, you can add your chapter logo if you'd like. The page title, this is probably a great way to add instructions if you want to. So you can go ahead and hit that Edit button. Again, you can call this Instructions. And here's where you're going to enter those instructions saying, please vote for one candidate in each category. And you can click Save to that, and you add any instructions you feel are necessary for the members to understand how to go through the process. And now here, this happened to default to the multiple choice question, but I do think this is the best type of question to be using. Certainly if you wanted to rank them or use check boxes or a drop down, you could do that. But again, multiple choice works just fine in this case. So please select, let's say, sorry about that. Please select one candidate for the president's role. Okay, and here you're going to put candidate number 1, candidate number 2, and so on. Okay. Now this, you want to be sure if you are going to send out electronically that your members are required to answer this. So you would need to go over to the Options button and click on Return Answer to this question to make sure they can't skip it. And then you're going to go ahead and click Save. And certainly if you have more than one role open, you would do the exact same process for each open role and along with the candidates. Then you're going to click Next. From here, it's going to allow you to preview, so you're going to see how your candidates are going to see that electronic ballot. Of course, you can always go back and make changes. You would come back to the Design Survey module and make any edits as necessary make those edits. And again, you're going to go through, preview it one more time or as many times as you need to make sure it's accurate. And once the survey design is complete, go ahead and click next, and you're going to determine how you're going to collect responses. Now, when I send out a survey link through SurveyMonkey, I usually get the web link, and this is because you can copy the link. You can send it via email out to your members. You can send it to the chapter's email address, and we can post it on your website. You can post this on your social media accounts if necessary. So I think it's just an easier way to collect that or to distribute that ballot out there. So you simply click on that, click copy, and then set it to whatever document you wanted to do that in. Any questions about that? Some of you may be familiar with SurveyMonkey. It's really a handy tool, so I would encourage you to use it if those of you that do not. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. Now, for those boards that do not want to use SurveyMonkey as your ballot tool, you can also use an electronic or paper form. Either format, be sure that all of your eligible members are given the opportunity to vote in a confidential and anonymous manner. You know, right here we have an example. I believe we have this out on ANFP Connect. This form can certainly be sent electronically, or you can have that in person at your chapter meeting, whichever you choose to do. You want to be sure either way to complete the volunteer information and the role descriptions on the template. Whatever's easier for everyone, but again, we want to be sure all of our eligible members are given that opportunity to vote. Now, following the distribution of either the electronic ballot or the paper ballot, the secretary will need to tally the votes. Or if you have a tellers committee in place, which their primary responsibility is to tally and confirm votes, those are the folks that are going to be responsible for collecting those responses and tallying them. Once the votes are tallied and accounted for, you can inform the board of the results and then the membership via email or letter. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, for those of you that would like to begin using the Slate process, which we do recommend, and that's currently what National uses, your first step is going to be implementing the nominating committee. The reason why that a nominating committee ensures are so important is because it ensures that long-term success of the chapter through their actions. They can do this by continually recruiting and specifically identifying the right candidates. That's really their job. And they want to be sure they're getting those volunteers the right skill set. This in turn will lead to a steady line of successors that are well qualified and can continue the process for long-term success. In addition to these responsibilities, the nominating committee is also responsible for creating the slate. And this is a pretty simple process. Just like the ballot process, you'll need to start with your call for volunteers. Again, if you want the candidate to meet a certain criteria, be sure you're asking the right questions. For example, if you want the candidate to have been a volunteer before, be sure you ask the member how many years of volunteering experience they have. Whether or not you choose it to be with ANFP is entirely up to you and your board. Or if your candidates have to be a CDM, confirm that they hold that credential. The information that we get back is only as good as the questions we're going to ask, and it's certainly going to help you save your time and your energy in the long run with the correct questions in your call. Once you've completed that call, you can further vet the candidates either by meeting them face-to-face or over the phone. This is currently what we do for our national board. You might want to consider asking them why they feel they'd be good for that position, or present them with a hypothetical scenario or issue and ask how they would handle it. Certainly something related to chapter management or board governance would be ideal. And, you know, it really just never hurts to ask these questions, as they're able to gain a better understanding, not only for you as the person or the candidate, but if they're the right fit as well. Then, based on their response or the list of experience, committee members should make their recommendation, the nominating committee members should make their recommendation to the entire committee. And that conversation might take some time, but it's certainly well worth it if you can slate the right candidate. Once those decisions are made, they need to then forward this to the board for their approval. And then we're going to present the slate of the chosen candidates, and that will present that into our entire membership via email, again, just as National does. And this will allow your members to review the slate and determine if they'd like to submit nominations within 15 different nominations, I should clarify, within 15 days of receiving the notice. This doesn't happen very often, but should they submit another nomination, then they need to have support from at least 10% of their voting members. And then if this really does happen, which again, it's not likely to, that's when you would default back to the ballot process. But this, again, it's not going to happen, especially if you take the time beforehand to properly vet your candidates and ensure they have the right people in the right role for the long haul. Any questions about this? I think I saw one pop up on chat, but if anybody has other questions, feel free to shout out. We do have a question regarding the SurveyMonkey. How many members can receive a ballot using SurveyMonkey? So again, if you copy that link, just as I showed you on the visual portion of the program, you can send that to everybody that has an email address within your chapter's membership or your state membership. It's unlimited. Just as long as they are a active voting member, then they can absolutely receive that ballot. Great question. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay, so once your positions are filled, the slate's gone out, it's come back without any sort of difficulty or challenges. Next, you're going to need to begin the daunting process of onboarding those new members. And I really view this as a continuous process, especially since our board roles are very demanding. They entail, quite a bit of knowledge, and this can all be passed off to the other officers as they rotate on and off. And ideally, onboarding will take place well before the volunteers take office and continue throughout the officer's first year, meaning that, yes, you can have the one-day meeting and go over the administrative and day-to-day things, but your new board members should have an opportunity to continually learn the role throughout the first year, either through mentoring from current officers, as well as through self-guided preparation and other ANFP resources. But first and foremost, start with that board orientation. Invite the new, as well as your former or your current board members, to review the responsibilities, train them in the chapter portal, review governing documents, ensure they're aware of the resources available to them out on ANFP Connect, in the marketplace, or on the chapter volunteer leaders community. We also have a board orientation checklist, as well as an orientation presentation with talking points available to our chapter leaders. That's to make this as easy as possible for you. You can't always retain every single bit of information when it comes to orientating your new board members, so I would definitely encourage you to use those materials to make that transition and onboarding a little easier for everyone. Then you want to be sure that your new volunteers or your officers are taking their own initiative to understand their role prior to taking the office. Start with having them review the volunteer handbook, all of the resources on ANFP Connect, and chapter policies and procedures as well. Encourage them to come back to their mentors with questions or concerns. Speaking of mentors, you want to ensure your incoming officers are paired with a former officer. It doesn't have to be the immediate past officer of that position, though it's always ideal, but someone who has been in the role previously that can answer their questions based on their own experience, and someone they can rely on for the guidance throughout their term as well. Also, whenever possible, allow your new officers that hands-on experience. Invite them to board meetings or have them help with your administrative tasks when possible, so they're able to ask those questions and gain a thorough understanding of the task or responsibility. Then, as your officers are fulfilling their term, encourage them to share their experiences with the board, whether it's a way to improve a process or something they would have known prior to taking the role. With that being said, I know volunteer roles are not perfect, so if you do have a negative experience or come across an issue, which unfortunately most of us do at some point, try to present a suggestion for a remedy or a way to improve upon it so that doesn't happen again to the next person taking on your role. Try to remain positive in that and know that you're making a difference when you are making that suggestion to improve things. These experiences, no matter what they are, should be shared in a positive manner with incoming board members at orientation, so they can continue to learn from others' challenges as well. Any questions about that? Now, another idea to continually improve your board and could actually be considered part of the overall onboarding process is a board assessment or evaluation. A good board is not afraid to take a good, hard look at themselves and understand the things that they do really well and the other things that need to be improved upon, and really ask the hard question: how are we doing as a board? A self-assessment will help you focus on what needs to be improved or possible areas of growth. It also bears mentioning that a self-assessment should be done when the board is not in the middle of a crisis or having issues with a difficult board member. You can certainly do this as new members are coming on a board, as they might provide insightful outlooks from what would be considered as an outsider perspective. Consider making this part of your orientation. Maybe it's every other year, every 3 years, depending on how long your terms are. But also keep in mind, this is not just a one-off assessment. It really doesn't do, it's not going to just create a to-do list. It's really sort of an investment. With that being said, there are a few questions you and your board members should ask yourself before going through a board self-assessment. And mainly, are you prepared to commit to the full process? This will take some time to ask questions, analyze the results, then create the next steps, or in some cases, continue the discussion and go back to the drawing board to ultimately improve the overall functionality of the board as a whole. And take effort, and all members need to be fully committed to the process. Everyone will need to be committed to developing assessment or choosing the right assessment for their board, responding to questions candidly and honestly and in a timely manner, analyzing and interpreting responses as a group, ideally face-to-face, and following through and determining what you'll need to do with the information and the next steps. So again, this isn't just a one-and-done kind of activity. It's going to take time, perhaps weeks or months to complete. So really something to ask yourself as well as your other board members if they're prepared to commit to this. Now, if you decide that you and your board are ready to commit to this process, there are several tools you can use to assess your board. Board assessments don't need to be complicated, and they really need to be used to assess the board as a whole and not the individual members. They can be something as simple as a SWOT analysis. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the SWOT analysis, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And with SWOT, they're identifying the board's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this can be done as a group, or you can have each board member complete this analysis anonymously. Again, if desired, you can use SurveyMonkey for this. We tend to use this as a tool when we visit chapters, and it's worked very, very well, especially because those board members can answer very openly and very honestly. But you'll need to ask yourself some questions if you do plan on using this analysis, some tough questions. And again, answering candidly and honestly if you really want to make this assessment worthwhile. Now for your strengths, be realistic, be honest. Don't just take the volunteer perspective. Consider how your members view your organization. What do you do well? What advantages do we have? Weaknesses, this is kind of hard. This one's a little tougher. Don't tiptoe around those weaknesses. Every chapter has weakness. Every, employee has a weakness. Some of us don't like to admit that, or it's hard to admit, but be constructive and positive in putting that on the table. Get some research from some outside perspectives. What do they think is one of our weaknesses that we can improve upon? Opportunities, be open-minded. Key opportunities may come from very unlikely and seemingly unrelated, maybe you have not thought of yet. Consider how you can exploit your strengths or address your weaknesses to generate opportunities. Give me 1 second here. We're going to just mute a couple of folks. Okay. And then with threats, have an open and expansive perspective. Keep in mind that the chapter should be drawing from your member feedback. If they have none, that might be a threat. Consider using some more member surveys that they're not given that chance to give their opinion or have their opinions heard. So think about that. Now, this is just one example of a tool for board assessment. There are many others that can be more detailed, or others that don't require as many open-ended responses. Something that uses a rank or a scale. Here is a sample of another board self-assessment that allows each member to rank the overall board in many areas of governance, including board membership, organization, policies and procedures, and participation. This particular sample we have here is from the Evangelical Council of Financial Accountability via National Council of Nonprofits. But as you can see, they focused on the board functionality and not chapter-related topics. Whichever assessment tool you choose to use, give everyone ample amount of time to really put thought into the responses. And once you've done that, you'll need to gather the responses and begin to review as a board. One way to do this is with the SWOT analysis response is use the TOES tool. And this is where you can dig deeper into those responses and determine how you can use your strengths to build your weaknesses or extinguish your threats with your opportunities. So for example, perhaps one of your strengths is putting on a great meeting. So many of our chapters put on awesome meetings. That may include new and exciting industry topics. Maybe a great vendor show is also in there and a great networking reception. But one of your chapter struggles is getting new members to attend these great meetings. Take that strength, or in this case, your well-rounded meeting or program, and ensure the right promotion is in place, including posting information on Facebook, your chapter website, creating flyers for distributions, and perhaps use one of your best promotional tools, your members, to spread the word. You could even incentivize those current members that bring a new member as well as the new members that attend. So you're taking that strength, which is your great meeting, and using that with your weakness, which is using that as a tool to recruit more of those new members. The TOES tool can also be used for other ranking assessments. So if you were to use the ranking self-board assessment, take a look at those areas where you scored low. How can they be improved upon with those areas that you scored higher? So match those two together. Again, either way, you're going to need to ask yourself some tough questions, which may lead to some tough discussion, but this is going to give us a better understanding of how we're doing as a board and how we can exploit those positives of the chapter to improve those weaker areas. For those that may be a little nervous or apprehensive about some of the tension this discussion may cause, you might want to consider using a facilitator. That could be a former board member that is well respected and trustworthy. They can remain neutral if things become a little challenging with that discussion. Any questions about these tools that we've just discussed here or these assessments? Okay. Well, both the assessments as well as the SWOT analysis guide and how to really do that are out on ANFP Connect under Volunteer Resources and Board Governance for anybody interested in those. All right, and remember, when your board is considering conducting a self-assessment, be sure they're ready to take on the task. Make sure they're ready. As we discussed earlier, this is really not a one-and-done activity, but investment into improving your board functionality. If you decide as a board to move forward with an assessment and you're not sure about the type of one to use, start very simple. Maybe you don't start with every area of board management, but with one specific area like policies and procedures or board participation. Also allow your board members to be candid and honest. I cannot stress this enough. You won't truly get a good look at your overall board until you get those honest answers. Again, you can use SurveyMonkey to do this or email your board members with an assessment form and have them return it in person, perhaps to a non-board member that you trust, and they can compile those responsibles and then distribute them back out to the board. And of course, none of this is really worth it if we can't do the follow-through. You can send out all the assessments, all the surveys that you want, but unless you're going to take action and put together a plan of action really to address the issues, there's really just no point in doing that. And last, you'll want to take each of these steps or initiatives and put them into regular practice that will help build your succession plan. Succession planning is not just recruitment, it's an overall long-term and ongoing process. However, one area we did not discuss in detail, which is part of the succession planning, is understanding the needs of our membership as well as our board. First, start with your membership. What is it that they want from your chapter and what is it they expect from your chapter? Start with a member survey that includes all areas of chapter management, meetings and education, your marketing efforts, network opportunities, and so on. Be sure you're really gauging what it is your members need. More importantly, where are you lacking? Where is it that they are not getting what they need from your chapter or from your board? From there, review those responses and determine how you can close those gaps, either as a board, using your committees, or perhaps micro-volunteering opportunities that will allow members to become engaged in some capacity even if it's just contributing their idea or suggestion to improve upon the chapter. Allow them to become a part of the solution. Even if something as simple as asking a member to elaborate on their thoughts or ideas, say you got a suggestion within your survey, ask them, what specifically do you want from the chapter? This way they're becoming more engaged. They're more likely to have motivation to help out, to ensure follow through on their idea or the initiative is really completed. If they're able to feel like they're part of something and making an impact, the more likely you will be able to recruit them to consider taking on a long-term role or at least stay committed to volunteering as their schedule allows. And certainly, if they're invested, they're ready to step up and take the next step to the next volunteer level, they'll need to be trained. As we discussed earlier, this is where your onboarding process will need to come into play. That's why it's so important to ensure your orientation and overall onboarding processes are in place to ensure that your newly recruited volunteers are successful in their roles. So we've kind of seen this snowball effect. Once we're understanding their needs, we can reach out to those folks directly. If they're comfortable with that, ask them to elaborate on them, and then ask them, hey, since you're passionate about this idea, or this was your idea, or you seem to know a lot about this, ask them to step up and take the lead on that project or that initiative. It's a great way to get them engaged and then further on to get them recruited. And then, of course, another part of our onboarding process is to monitor our new volunteers. Provide them a mentor, checking in on them on a regular basis, not just when those challenges or those issues arise. Don't be afraid to ask them about what they would change in their role or even what they would change with the onboarding process. So when the next recruit or new volunteer comes along, these issues have been resolved, leading to a smoother transition. So monitoring is a very important step in your succession plan. And of course, last, which we didn't really discuss too much in detail today, but I know many of you know, and we've discussed it several times in the past, that recognizing and incentivizing our volunteers is crucial in succession planning and retention. As a volunteer, a simple thank you can go a very long way, but recognizing these volunteers among their peers and making your members aware of their contributions can go an even longer way. Consider it an incentive for years of service or when outgoing board members are rotating off as well. And don't forget about those volunteers that help in small ways too, either with small tokens of appreciation, a thank you letter, or even just a shout out in the newsletter or on social media platform. It always feels good to be thanked or recognized no matter how big or small the effort. All right, so I know we've covered quite a bit today, a lot to take in. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, and certainly always feel free to reach out to me if you think of something later. We did record this program, so I'll be sending out the link to that. And feel free to view it as many times as needed or pass it along to others that you think may find it useful. And of course, just a couple of important dates, or date rather, to keep in mind. September 15th, we have a couple things due for the second half of the chapter rebate, and that's the affiliate agreement, which should be reviewed by the entire board and then signed by the president. And then proof of attendance to an ANFP leadership session. So that could even include today's chapter chat session, any of the ones that go as far back as June. If you attended any of the regional chapter best practices sessions, or if you attended anything at ACE too in regards to chapter management and more leadership geared towards those things. And certainly if you've done the LMS sessions that we have out in the marketplace, that can qualify as well. All right, well, again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a quick reminder that we have another chapter chat taking place on Tuesday, October 23rd. And we're going to talk about how we can automate our volunteer processing procedures, and do we need to automate or do we need to train? And how do we maximize those current skills, and how do we learn new skills as a volunteer? So keep that date in mind, and thank you everyone so much for joining us, and everyone have a great week.